What's up, Taiwan? I'm Sandy Chu with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. At least 17 people are confirmed dead in eastern Taiwan after earlier flash floods triggered by Typhoon Ragasa on Tuesday. Floodwaters inundated Guangfu Township in Hualien after a barrier lake overflowed its dam. Rescue workers from around the country have converged on Guangfu to help with cleanup efforts. Over 100 missing people have been found, but over a dozen are still unaccounted for. About 3 dozen people were hurt, and authorities still have the highest level flood alert out for the area. Taiwan is moving to require prior approval for 47 chip-related exports to South Africa. That's after South Africa downgraded and pushed to relocate Taiwan's representative office. It's a new strategy for Taipei, one that poses possibilities and risks, Chris Gorin reports.
South African car factories like these could soon be feeling negative effects after Taiwan announced that it will restrict exports of 47 products to the country, including computer chips and memory, the latest turn in a dispute over Taiwan's diplomatic missions in South Africa.
南非政府在今年7月21日发布政府公报，片面对我国驻南非代表处以及驻开普敦办事处采取更名降格的举措。我国政府基于维护国家主权及尊严的立场，即启动限制晶片输往南非的反制措施。
At the center is South Africa's move to downgrade Taiwan's representative office from a so-called liaison office to a commercial office, and to move it out of the political capital Pretoria to the country's largest city, Johannesburg, about 56 kilometers away. But Taipei protested the decision from the start and continues to operate at its Pretoria location. The export controls represent an escalation from Taipei. And while South Africa is not a major buyer of advanced chips, certain local industries could be affected.
南非它在这个半导体的这个制造设计的能力是很有限，所以它最主要还是要依赖这个进口晶片成熟制成的晶片那如果说我们对它管制的话，就会影响南非的，比如说它的电子制造啊、通讯设备，还有汽车零组件这些产业。
The move marks a turning point for Taiwan's use of export controls for diplomatic purposes. Speaking in New York, South Africa's president spoke about Taiwan's actions and his own.
The reduction of exports to South Africa obviously will impact on us, but we will always find a way of dealing with them or with that issue. So in our view, the step that we have taken has been taken by many other countries in the world. With regard to Taiwan. And our view is that it should not be over-politicized.
Taiwan's role as a key chip supplier creates opportunities for leverage. But some experts say, as chips made in other countries like South Korea and China continue to advance, the strategy also poses a risk of backfiring.
You might open up a trade opportunity for mainland China in the future, maybe hurting Taiwan's export market in South Africa in the future, because once it's gone, maybe it's gone. You know, they might find alternative sources. Yes, in the short term might work, but in the long term might not.
Taiwan's foreign ministry says it wants to consult with South Africa in the 60 days before the export controls take effect, a window that could show whether both sides dial down tensions or dig in their respective positions. Luffy Lee and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
U.S. lawmakers are restating Washington's position on Taiwan, urging Chinese officials that the issue must be settled peacefully and without coercion. They made the comments during a meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, aimed at easing tensions and improving communication between the two countries. U.S. Representative Adam Smith, who's heading the bipartisan congressional delegation, says he hopes both countries can keep military-to-military dialogue open to ease tensions and avoid mishaps. The delegation has also met with China's top legislator, Zhao Leji, as well as its premier and defense minister. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has called for Taiwan's inclusion in the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, during its latest meeting.
It is also essential that all international aviation stakeholders, particularly Taiwan, are meaningfully included in ICAO's technical activities. There is no room for politics on this question. This is about safety and security of the global system that we all enjoy, and of which Taiwan is an active part.
Pressure from China has prevented Taiwan from taking part in the organization, despite being the world's 11th biggest aviation market. Both US and Canadian politicians have been pushing in recent days for Taiwan's inclusion. US President Donald Trump has addressed the UN on a range of topics. But one big issue on his mind during the speech was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a change of posture, he's now behind NATO, and even suggesting Ukraine can restore its pre-war borders with help. John Van Triest has this report.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning.
U.S. President Donald Trump is met with a crowd of reporters at the United Nations. What's the message you're bringing? One shouts. It's something the world is wondering as Trump prepares to address this year's General Assembly. Many world leaders will do so, but few are as powerful or unpredictable. The answer is a mix. In about an hour-long speech, he attacked immigration in Europe, called green energy a con job, credited himself with stopping wars, questioned the very point of the UN, and more. Unlike his predecessor Joe Biden, he did not discuss Taiwan. And even China only got a few mentions for buying Russian oil and making wind turbines. One thing definitely on Trump's mind, though, is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And after largely inconclusive talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, he says the U.S. is ready to put more pressure on Moscow, and that he expects Europe to chip in, particularly by stopping imports of Russian energy.
In the event that Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, then the United States is fully prepared to impose a very strong round of powerful tariffs, which would stop the bloodshed, I believe, very quickly. But for those tariffs to be effective, European nations, all of you are gathered here right now, would have to join us in adopting the exact same measures.
Trump's stance on the Ukraine war and NATO's role in it looks to have shifted markedly. After his UN speech, he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Before the meeting, the previously NATO skeptic Trump even told reporters he's now strongly behind the alliance, especially as Russian aircraft violate allies' airspace.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
And that's just the start of an apparent about-face. Trump once said Ukraine might have to give up territory to Russia to end the war. But in a social media post, he says Russia looks like a paper tiger and suggested that Ukraine, with support, can get back to its pre-war borders. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy didn't give much away about what the two discussed in their meeting. But in an exchange with a reporter, he had this to say about Trump.
I said it from the first second of our today's meeting. I will not share all the details.
But from your perspective, is it a game changer that he now believes, that President Trump now believes?
Trump is a game changer by himself.
Trump has taken a special interest in ending the 3-year Russia-Ukraine war. And as of Tuesday, it seems like he's trying out a new tactic to get the job done. Howard Zhang and John Van Triest for TaiwanPlus.
For a better understanding of what Trump's UN speech means for Taiwan and China, John spoke to Jia Yan-zhong of the National University of Singapore.
So during his UN speech, Trump mentioned a wide range of topics, but Taiwan, the Taiwan Strait, didn't figure in his remarks, and he really didn't mention China that much. Why do you think that is?
Well, Trump's speech seems, a lot of his speeches seem to be focused on what is on his mind at that particular moment or sort of around that time. So it just would appear to me that for whatever reason, Trump was not thinking hard about China or Taiwan when he was preparing and making a speech. I mean, he has a very impromptu style. He talked a lot about teleprompters and escalators, for instance.
But do you think that this lack of mention of China or even the Indo-Pacific shows some sort of change in U.S. policy towards Taiwan or China?
It could, but it's really hard to tell from just one Trump speech. I mean, one thing we know from Trump is he sort of flies by the seat of his pants a little bit, especially when making public deliveries of speeches. So, it could be there's some change. It could be just that it's not interesting to him at this moment.
Do we have any indication from other U.S. officials about what this might mean?
So far, I haven't seen any sort of readouts that talk about the China relationship. I mean, what we do know is that, there was that TikTok deal that Trump had touted as a big victory for himself. What that actually means in terms of details, we've not seen, but that's the sort of most recent sort of big issue he's sort of touched on with China. He's, touched on other issues such as buying Russian oil, but that didn't come up this time around. In fact, when he talked about Russian oil in this speech, it referenced the Europeans, actually.
Well, even if the U.S. policy hasn't changed towards the Indo-Pacific region and Taiwan and China, can we say from this speech that maybe the U.S.'s foreign policy focus has shifted? After all, he'd had a meeting with Zelenskyy afterwards and was talking about Ukraine.
Certainly, it seems that in this speech that the Trump administration and Trump himself seems far more supportive of the Ukrainian war effort, of the Europeans as they resist Russian aggression. So that seems to be what's at the top of his mind. Whether that means that there is some sort of going to be some sort of sacrifice of U.S. resources in the Indo-Pacific, that it's not possible to tell that from this speech.
That was Jian Zhong of the National University of Singapore. The world economy is expected to slow down this year, but not by as much as first thought. A major international organization has updated its global growth forecast, showing a slight improvement over its previous outlook, IG reports.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, has raised its global economic growth forecast to 3.2% this year, while keeping next year steady at 2.9%. The 2025 forecast is 0.3 percentage points up from its previous report, as the impact of U.S. tariff gradually filters through global markets.
The full effects of these tariffs will become clearer as firms run down the inventories that build up in response to tariff announcements and as the higher tariff rates continue to be implemented.
The U.S. in April unleashed sweeping tariffs on goods from countries around the world, and while the impact is still unfolding, the U.S. is grappling to maintain stability. The Fed announced a rate cut earlier in September and is warning of rising unemployment risks.
Recent data show that the pace of economic growth has moderated. The unemployment rate is low but has edged up. Job gains have slowed, and the downside risks to employment have risen. At the same time, inflation has risen recently and remains somewhat elevated.
In Taiwan, strong investments in AI continue to drive the economy. Export orders in August jumped nearly 20%, marking the 7th month in a row of growth, partly because companies rushed to ship goods before tariffs hit. Taiwan's exports could face pressure this year as U.S. President Donald Trump moves ahead with a 20% tariff, but some analysts say current investment means overall growth won't be hit too hard.
从长期的角度来看，这包含今年下半年，或者甚至到更长期的这个未来，我都不觉得台湾的经济成长会有很明显的不好的状况，应该都会维持一个还蛮好的成长态势。
As Taiwan continues to negotiate its final tariff rate with the U.S., it's not just Taipei but capitals around the world watching closely to see how tariffs reshape the global economy. Eason Chen, NIG for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we leave you with images from the Paris Opera, where Verdi's Aida is reimagined in a staging that echoes today's conflicts. I'm Sani Chi, take care and see you next time.
For more news from Taiwan and around the world, download our app or check out the TaiwanPlus website. Ready? Go. Ready? Just jump.
Okay, jump!